Bonjour, Marie.
Oh, bonjour, Jodi.
Today we're talking about teaching abroad. Have you ever fancied it, Marie?
Yes, but as you can tell, I'm not multilingual. So the place I was thinking of going to was Australia, and I seriously looked into
Interesting.
it. Um,
Yeah.
but I had a husband at the time, and he wouldn't come with me, so it was a bit of a non-starter. What about you?
I looked into Hawaii and the USA, but
Yeah.
I actually did a month teaching in the Netherlands while I was doing my teacher
Oh,
training. So as part of my PGCE, I got the opportunity to go teach at an English-speaking school, fully funded because we were their CPD. So they basically hired us to go and help with their specialist maths language. And so there was a couple of, well, I was the only maths teacher. There was a PE teacher, a business
hmm,
teacher, English teacher, in fact, which was
amazing!
interesting because they were
What a good
teaching Dutch
opportunity.
literature. It was honestly one of the most interesting opportunities just to
Yeah,
see different education system. It was brilliant.
yeah.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodi.
So, as you may have guessed, today we're talking about teaching abroad, and obviously we are not alone today.
Yes, we have a guest. Our guest today is Aasha Chauhan, who is currently working as a history teacher in UAE, but who has just left Italy. And hopefully, she's going to tell us all about her adventures. Welcome,
Thank
Aasha.
you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime. What sort of school do you work in at the minute? Is it an international school? Kind of what's tell us everything.
Okay, so at the moment, I have just started at a new school in the UAE, and it's my first experience of teaching in the UAE, and it's a British international school. So, which broadly means that we follow the national curriculum for England during Key Stage 3, followed by international GCSE, and then A levels or the IB. And being a British international school, it generally means that you've got some sort of accreditation, such as a BSO school, which is a British Schools Overseas, or COBIS, which is Council of British International Schools. So that's what we really mean by a British international school, as it follows,
Mhm.
broadly speaking, the British curriculum as opposed to the international or American system.
And what kind of pupils have you got? Who are the people that go to an international school?
So it's a diverse mix of students, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about international teaching, that you do really get to teach a diverse cohort from people all over the world. My particular school, the demographic tends to be students from Egypt, India, Pakistan. So it's
Mm.
a really sort of vibrant community of students.
Mm, yeah, sounds it.
And do you teach predominantly in English then, or do you have to teach in Arabic, or is it kind of a mixture?
Thankfully, it's all in English. So
Oh,
the
phew.
students have to follow the like the Ministry of Education's
Mm.
rules and regulations, and part of that is Islamic studies,
Yeah,
and Arabic is part of that. But we've got an Arabic team of teachers to teach that part of the curriculum.
fair
Brilliant.
enough.
So there is no necessity to speak several languages before you can go and teach internationally, would you say?
There isn't actually. So prior to teaching in the UAE, I taught in Italy. Um, and for that, I did try to learn some Italian. I think I always wanted to work and teach in Italy. So before I moved out there, I took part in a Italian language course after
Yeah,
school hours and tried to sort of pick up my language, because it does help. It helps you
of
integrate
course.
with local members of staff, with the
Yeah, of
students as well, and
course.
also to become part of the community rather than
Mm,
just hanging out with
yeah,
fellow expats. So it
Mm.
yeah.
becomes a more enriching experience, I think, when you try and sort of immerse yourself in the culture.
Mm, yeah.
So, what are the benefits? Because obviously, UAE and Italy are both very, very different cultures to here. Kind of,
Mm.
what would be, how does that affect your teaching?
So, I think from a history perspective, it's when you're designing the curriculum, you want to take advantage of the rich local history
Of
of the
course,
area that
yeah.
you're teaching with, particularly somewhere like Italy. Like my background's in classics and ancient history, so it was an absolute
Okay.
Your
dream
big
to teach
gift.
history in Rome. So the school that I worked in was very near to Ostia Antica, which is an
Oh,
ancient
wow.
archaeological ruins. And so I built a scheme of work around that. So we were able to take our students to visit the site.
Oh,
Oh,
amazing.
amazing.
And so it's fantastic from being able to just bring the subject to life, which is what history is really. And to
Absolutely.
actually have take students to the centre of Rome. When I taught the IB, we taught the Renaissance, so we were able to take the
Yeah.
students to Florence or to see the
Oh,
Renaissance art in
Oh,
the
I'm so
centre of
jealous.
Rome and see the exhibits. It was a really wonderful experience, and really
yeah.
enriching.
So out of interest, because I remember learning, I grew up in Sheffield and we learned about the Industrial Revolution like every other day and the steelworks every other day. And we'd go to like a visit for the steelworks. You'd be like, yeah, I've been here every year since I was 5. And then latterly I've told my friends about it who've moved to Sheffield and they're like, oh, this is so interesting. I'm like, did the Italian students take like all those opportunities kind of for granted, for want of a less kind of aggressive word, or did they realise how lucky?
I think, generally speaking, the students that I taught were really passionate about their own cultural
Yeah.
heritage and the
Yeah.
rich culture of Italy. So they were quite
Yeah.
proud to be studying Italian history, and a lot of students, interestingly, they weren't as aware of ancient Roman history as I thought they would be.
Oh,
Oh.
interesting.
So that was quite nice getting to explore things with them. And I learnt a lot from them as well, just from, sites to visit and places which have the best view of the forum to check out.
So how did you get into working abroad? What first attracted you to it?
So I had predominantly have just worked in schools in Warwickshire prior to moving to Italy. And it's in the last couple of my years in the school that I was in, I think for about 7, 8 years, I introduced classical civilization to the school. As a part of that, we organised a trip to
Oh.
Pompeii, to Rome.
Oh,
And I
oh,
remember
so
just
jealous.
visiting it with the students and I just thought, wow, I want to live here. And you have those pipe dreams. And I thought, you know what? I could actually make it a reality. So I put things into place. So, like I said, I took Italian lessons. I remember actually a member of the site staff at my school, he was Italian. He gave me a few lessons here and there.
Oh,
And then I sort of
brilliant.
just decided to go for it. And so I applied for some jobs in Rome, and I'd only get so far in the application process. And I thought, you know what, I need to ask a principal what's wrong with my CV. And it was a really useful conversation because he said to me that you need more diverse teaching experience.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so I was
right.
thinking, oh, how do I get that? So I made the decision to have a year out, and in that year, I took a year out traveling around Italy.
Amazing.
I did a course at some of the language schools in Rome and Florence. It really reinforced my desire to teach out there. And then I
Yeah.
decided to do a CELTA because I felt that that would be a route into the international school
And what is that?
circuit. So a CELTA it's like a teaching English as a foreign language
All right.
Oh,
qualification.
yeah.
Um, And then I did that in Birmingham actually, and it was a 5-week intensive course. And it gave me the experience of just teaching nationalities different from my own. It gave me an insight of what it's like teaching to people whose native language isn't English. And
Yeah.
once I did that course, my CV became a bit more desirable.
Right.
And this opportunity came up to teach EFL, so English as a Foreign Language, at a
Yeah.
school in Puglia. And obviously, I wanted to teach history in Rome, but this opportunity came up, and I just thought, why not go for it? So I ended up accepting this job in a small little town in Puglia, not really knowing the language, not really knowing what I was letting myself in for. And it turned out to be one of the most positive experiences that I've had. I was teaching in the Italian state system,
Oh, wow.
so teaching PONs, so the Cambridge language programs,
Yeah.
and also doing a little bit of history teaching there as they'd introduced IGCSE.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a really positive experience, particularly it was a small town where not many people spoke English. So I was forced to learn the language, and the people were incredibly welcoming, made some fantastic friends from that small town. And it was just a really positive experience. It's everything that you want from moving abroad. Meeting new people, immersing yourself in the culture. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how history is taught in different schools as well, because you take it for granted in the UK that it's all very much skills based. It's all about source analysis, investigations, interpretations, critical thinking. Whereas in
Yeah.
Italian schools, it tends to be more sort of a chronological narration of what happened,
Oh.
and sort of memorizing key chunks of
Yeah.
Oh,
history, which
interesting.
is something that we don't tend to do. And we
Mm.
sort of sometimes, I think, we look down on that type of teaching. But actually, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because they had a good grasp of knowledge about events which had happened
Yeah.
sequentially.
Yeah.
Whereas in UK schools, we tend to do subjects, skills based, but in terms of the historical periods, we do a period in depth. So there's lots of gaps in
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
knowledge.
for sure.
We jump from 1066 to the 14th century sometimes,
Yeah.
without lacking that sort of
Yeah.
chronological
Yeah.
understanding. So that was quite interesting as well. And then, sort of, whilst I was in Altamora, which is the town in Puglia, I applied for a job at an international school in Rome,
Oh, bro.
visited the school, and I was in two minds because I really loved the town that I lived in.
Yeah.
But then teaching history in Rome was the dream.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
felt I had to accept it. I visited the school and absolutely loved the school. It was small. It had this family community environment to it, and I was there for 4 years at the end.
Wow.
Now here's the $64 million question. Are you fluent in Italian now?
Oh, so I think when I lived in Altamora, my Italian got to quite a good level. And because it was a case of having to
Yeah.
speak in Italian, I had Italian friends, I communicated with them in Italian. And I feel every year that I was in Rome, my Italian got a little bit worse,
Oh,
because
no.
my friendship group were mostly expats, and I was busier than I was,
Yeah.
and so I didn't have
Yeah.
as much time to study. But it's definitely something which I'm still pursuing. Still have Duolingo on my lap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned there kind of your friendship groups. What's life like outside of the classroom? Is it easy to socialise and to build a life? Do you end up just socialising with colleagues and other expats, or?
So I think in Rome, initially, because you're all in that situation of moving somewhere new, that you do tend to sort of hang around sometimes with your colleagues, particularly if people have moved out here by themselves. And then you go for an after work aperitivo, and from that you get to meet meet like-minded people and form friendship groups from there. But then there's lots of opportunities to meet people outside of the workplace as well. Lots of language exchange groups that you can meetups. I joined an international choir in Rome and made a lot of
Interesting.
friends from that. So I think if you're proactive, you
Yeah.
can make friends outside of work. At the moment where I am in Dubai, I feel like I'm a university student again because they provide the accommodation for you. And we're all all the new teachers are all living in the same apartment block, knocking on each other's doors for a cup of coffee. So it's being
Oh,
student
that's
again.
lovely.
That was one of the best bits of university. Yeah, yeah.
What's on your mind? Let us know your thoughts, ideas, and anecdotes. Drop us a line at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk.
How are you finding the UAE? Is it very, very different to Italy?
Yes, it is very different. I'm still finding my feet a little bit. It's just been 3 months that I've been here for so far.
Do you kind of have to learn about local history? Because I remember kind of speaking to a friend who's a teacher in America, and all they taught until high school was American history. Genuinely blew my mind. By American history, I mean kind of since Columbus to now, not kind of pre-colonization. How they fitted that in over like 11 years, genuinely don't understand. But like obviously mostly what we learned at school was British history with a little bit of European history, and every so often you got Egyptians thrown in there, which
Ancient
for me
Egypt.
made me think that Egypt was part of Europe until I was about 10.
Oh, bless you.
I was not the brightest. So are you learning local history? Do you feel do you need to teach local history and obviously the nation's history?
Yes. So when you're devising the curriculum, because we are a British international school, we do sort of look at the British curriculum, but the content has to be relevant to the students that you're teaching. As much as I
Yeah, of
love
course.
reenacting the execution of Charles I, are the students in the UAE going to enjoy it or find it relevant? So you pick bits from the UK curriculum, but also merge it with the local history of the UAE and also with the international cohort that you're teaching as well.
Yeah.
So we try and build in topics such as the Mughal Empire, and we still look at the Renaissance, but we look at it from the perspective of the relationship with the East and the influence that the East had on the European Renaissance, and just look at different perspectives a bit more. And that's quite interesting as well. When you're teaching topics, but from students with a different background, so their interpretation on things obviously is different. So when you're teaching Mussolini and fascism in Italy, or the Reformation in Italy, or controversial topics like the British Empire to a cohort of students, who are predominantly Indian, Egyptian, and it's really interesting those debates that you have with them, and that's something which I find really illuminating from teaching internationally. I think
Yeah, I
the way
bet it
they see
is.
the world, the way they interpret things, the perspectives they have.
I remember one lesson with Musghal where we looked at the Tudors, and she had a spinning globe, and we looked at what was happening elsewhere in the world at the time that Henry VIII was going through all his different wives. And it was genuinely fascinating because you think about the Tudors, and I have a rough timeline in my head of British history, but actually all this other stuff happening at exactly the same time, it's easy to forget about and not appreciate that. So I guess that internationality is...
Yes, and I think sometimes you have a danger of seeing things as isolated topics, and you don't think
Exactly.
about things going on simultaneously. So when we're looking at Elizabeth I, she's a contemporary of Akbar and the Mughal Empire, and to think that those two periods are coinciding. I think particularly with the UAE, the school that I work in actually is in Sharjah, and it's an emirate which is a bit more conservative than Dubai. So things which would be permitted to teach in Dubai aren't necessarily so in Sharjah. So that's been
Oh,
quite
interesting.
challenging as a history teacher, particularly, you want to make the subject relevant, and you do that by linking things to events which are happening globally, internationally, and those are conversations that we're not permitted to have.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
So we have to meticulously go through any textbooks to make sure that
Wow.
there's no references to Israel, for example, or maps. Can't say the Persian Gulf, but has to say the Arabian
Oh,
Gulf, and just little things like that.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
interesting.
And
And that comes
so,
from the government, those
yes, so
guidelines and
that comes from the
restrictions.
government guidelines, yeah, and
Wow.
which we have to, abide by. Also, your standard topics, year 9 topics, the interwar years, the rise of the dictators, that we can't teach that either, and
Wow.
the church, and which is difficult because even when you're looking at, the relationship between state and society, you can't just
Mm.
eradicate the church from that. So we just get
Yeah.
No.
around it by, not mentioning anything, just saying the church was a power base, and just try and, I think as long as you're not sort of promoting ideologies, you can
Mm-hmm.
say the term. You've just got to be very cautious,
Mm.
and which can be difficult when you're having debates and you're having these
Yeah.
QA sessions, and when students are generally inquisitive and
Yeah.
want to know about events, and they ask you questions, and you have to stop yourself from answering, and
Mm.
yeah, so that's been a challenge which I didn't really expect as much.
And is there literally like a list of guidelines
Yeah,
and things you can and can't do?
list of guidelines, yes, what can
Wow.
be taught, what cannot be taught, what's not permitted to be in textbooks.
Oh.
I was teaching a lesson on the British Empire, and there was the famous map of Britain from the
Mm-hmm.
18th
Yeah.
century,
Yeah.
and it was showing how the treatment of the indigenous people, and some of the ladies were topless. I didn't think anything of it, and
Mm.
someone
Yeah.
pointed it out, so I had to put sort of speech bubbles on the top with think questions just to hide them.
So, what advice would you offer to UK teachers that are hoping to teach abroad? Is there ways they can research things like this, or kind of where do they need to start?
So my main advice would be, because it always bemuses me the amount of people who accept jobs at an international school without having visited the country before. So I
Really?
think that's really important to visit the country before, and if you can, visit the school,
Mm.
because you don't know until you're out there. So I think that's important. Try and research as much as possible. Try and learn the language if you can.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and just sort of try and have that work-life balance, I think, because international teaching is giving you the opportunity to see parts of the world and explore. So it is important to take the time out to do that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to lose that opportunity, do you?
No, because otherwise you could be teaching anywhere.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an
Thank
absolute pleasure
you.
talking to you,
Yeah,
Aasha.
it's been really nice. Thank you.
You've
Thank you
inspired
for having
me.
me.
You're
Anytime.
welcome.
Oh wow, this has been so interesting, hasn't it?
Hasn't it just? It's really fired me up to go and try teaching abroad, which is completely impractical, but sounds really lovely.
It's made me want to brush up on my Italian, by which I mean, learn some Italian. Thank you so much for listening to this absolutely fascinating conversation, and thank you, as always, to our guest. If you want to be part of the conversation, don't forget you can email us at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk, and don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on those alerts, etc., so that you know when we're kind of publishing more.
This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.